Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is the 14th day of December 2022. Today, what took place, what I've heard this morning is that the Fed, which is the Federal Reserve System, which is not it's not anything to do with the federal government. You better get that in your head, folks. You better understand what's taking place. It's been taking place for over 100 years in this country, and how they rate the people here in this country and steal from them. So they've increased it this time. This is the fifth increase of the rate borrowing money. So the first one was 0.75, the second one was 0.75, the third one was 0.75, the fourth one was 0.75. So that adds up to 3% percentage points. And then today, with another 0.50, the rate has gone up 3.5 since the first of the year. In fact, it's not even been the first of the year. They claim that they're actually, quote unquote, trying to stop inflation. But in reality, that's not their objective. Their objective is to cause hardship for all Americans, especially those who are borrowing money of the Fed. And again, I want to point out very clearly that the Fed is not anything to do with the federal government. In fact, it's such a sad day that took place in 1913 when they created not only money out of nothing, eventually. It used to be based upon gold and silver. That was what paper money was based upon. No longer. 1971, Nixon took us off the Fed took us off the gold standard. And so with this taking place, what it does, it discourages businesses to borrow money. And if businesses cannot borrow money or at an astronomical rate, what happens simply is that they don't borrow, or they don't borrow enough, or they gradually can't do it anymore and no longer in business. And that's what they're doing. They're eliminating the competition. Part of this goes back to 2020, when all this whole thing started with the psychological warfare that's been on the people here, based upon fear, on some type of what I would call that there's some kind of thing that can kill you out there. Somehow, some germs can kill you, when in reality, that's a lie. Pasteur was the one who promoted that idea, but it's only a theory. Theories are not facts, folks. Okay. So what transpired is that people, by the psychological warfare that's been done to the people, didn't see themselves as the authority and looked to others as being their authorities. And you have to understand at this time that you are the authority in all walks of your life. And so if you're not going to look at it that way, you're going to be fooled. So for example, I'm going to show you a couple things here. If you can see these, these are little parts here. This is a what they call a little pin anchor. Can you see that? I'll put it up a little closer. I picked these up last week. This particular thing is made of lead. It's a lead part, and then it has what they call a nail. And what you do is simply, when you hit it, the nail, it expands into a hole. Usually in concrete is what they usually do, and this lead piece spreads out. So this ran me, I bought two of them. These are 95 cents a piece. These are not made here in America anymore either. There's no excuse for that, okay? Because in the 1990s, Bill Clinton made sure that we passed NAFTA with a lot of other Republicans going along with it, which is what they call free trade, which benefited, again, the corporations, the larger corporations, who could actually bring in products from China, Mexico, at cheap labor. and so then they can make larger profits. Well, this is no longer made here. This is probably made in China, as far as I know. So when you multiply this, say 95 cents times 100, it's $95 for this. Okay? We used to sell this in my dad's business. These little simple anchors. They probably didn't cost no more than 15 to 20 cents without price. So there would only be $15 to $20 for a pack of 100 of them. Okay? This is in the 1990s or late 80s. So now, these particular screws here are what they call number 10, probably 1032s, round head machine screws. And this is probably, I think, 1.5 inches long. These are 50 cents a piece. Multiply that by 100 is $50. I doubt these cost us back then, or sold for, maybe $10 or $12 a 100. And my point is simply is that this is disaster. This is a disaster for people. Because that means everything else has to increase. So you have to increase your wages for everybody else, supposedly. Although it doesn't happen now in this country because simply is all this is made somewhere else. So it's imported. And there is no import tax on it. So the benefit of not only the government could actually be collecting money off the import tax with this trade is null, period. Most of you might think this is boring, but you're going to find out sooner or later that this is very, very important. And if you don't figure it out, you're going to be in a hell of a mess. Okay? So these little plastic anchors here are 23 cents a piece. Okay. Probably, we didn't sell these probably no more than probably 8 cents a piece. So it'd be $8 a 100. So this is now $23 a 100. So you wonder why everything costs so much. It's not because, the product is actually cheaper now than they can make. But what happens simply is the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to go. And so when you go to somewhere and buy something, and you say, hey, like today I went and I have a sweet tooth, that is sometimes, and I have bought what I call these Fig Newtons. It's a small package. It's Murray Cookie is probably the one that makes it here. I live near Augusta, Georgia. It may not be. They probably just do it for Walmart. I can remember over a year ago that they were basically right around $1.99 for the pack. Today, I went in there, which I didn't buy them. I'm not going to pay that much for them. It's $2.49. And you say, well, that's not a whole heck of a lot of money. That's just, $2 and, it's just $1.50. Yeah, but the problem simply is everything else has gone up with it. That's the problem. And has your wages gone up? Have they? Because that's an enormous increase. Some of this is over 50%. In other words, it's double what it was last year. No one talks about these things as though everything's okay. The train's going down the track and everything's okay. There's no issues here. When reality simply is no country can survive like this. They can't. Because people stop buying because they can't afford it anymore. Because their wages are not going up. Okay? There are people today, young people, who work for $12 or $13 an hour. $12 or $13 an hour back in the 1990s was decent pay, not great pay, but it was decent pay. So that's 30 years ago, which means simply is it's not worth anything today. You're basically getting paid maybe $2 or $3 an hour is what you're doing. And with that going on, how can you afford anything? And what they want to do is put you in debt. As long as you make such and such amount of money to buy a car or whatever, they'll give you a loan, so to speak, but you're going to be unable to pay that loan back. You see, and then with the interest rates what they are now, if you bought a house, which is what they're doing, they are destroying this country piece by piece. right before your eyes. And the media just simply reports this, and they don't understand, because they don't understand basic economics. You see. So let me read something to you. This is from The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. I would suggest you get the copies of these books, or at least try to read a book or get it from an interlibrary loan and understand what's in here. This is the Bible, in my opinion, of what has happened in the last 100 years in this country. So I'm going to read something from you, just to share with you what really goes on and how everything is pretty much controlled. This is page 64, and we know that London is the world's financial center because it can command enormous amounts of capital created at its command by the Federal Reserve Board in the United States. They create money out of nothing, folks. That's what they do. They create it out of nothing. And it benefits them. And as long as you don't know these things, you are fooled. But how is this possible? We have already established that the monetary policy of the United States, the interest rates, the volume and value of money, and sales of bonds are decided not by the figureheads of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, but by the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Well, that's right. The pretended decentralization of the Federal Reserve System and its 12 other banks are equally autonomous regional banks. And it has been a deception since the Federal Reserve Act became law in 1913. In other words, the Federal Bank of New York decides all this. It's a way of cleverly saying that basically there are 12 banks and we all work together as a community, when reality simply is it's just a figureheads. The other 11 are figureheads. The one in the Federal Bank in New York City is the one that makes the decisions in that report. The United States monetary policy stems solely from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York is yet another fallacy. Thus, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York itself is autonomously, in other words, it runs everything, and free to set monetary policies for the entire United States without any outside interference. Outside interference is especially untrue. We might believe in this autonomy if we did not know that the majority stock of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York was purchased by 3 New York City banks. These banks in 1913, I should say 1914, were First National Bank, National City Bank, and the National Bank of Commerce. Examination of the principal stockholders in these banks in 1940 and today reveals a direct London connection. So this, again, is all being controlled. And we know that there's a trinity going on here that controls the whole world. The Vatican is the religious center, London is the banking center, and Washington is the military center. And that's how things are enforced. In other words, if you don't go along with what's being done, you are, as another country, you may think you're sovereign, but you step out of line, and the United States will be there, the military will be there to enforce whatever. There'll be threats, eventually there'll be ways of throwing people out of office, all these type of things. Okay? So, let's go on here in the addendum from page 179 here of this book. And this is what Eustace Mullins found out on Tuesday, July 26, 1983. The list of members banking holding Federal Reserve Bank of New York stock included 27 New York City banks. You can tell that's where it's all at. Resulting or amounting to 66% of the total outstanding number of shares, namely 7.005 million and 700,000. Some of the largest ones here are I'll show. Bankers Trust, which is no longer in existence, has been another bank. I would have to look that up. But anyway, you can do that yourself. The Bank of New York, Chase Manhattan Bank. So here's Bankers Trust has, quote, what they have, 6% of the market here, okay? Bank of New York, 2%. Chase Manhattan, 14%. Chemical Bank, 8%. Citibank, which is at 15%. European American Bank and Trust at 2%. J. Henry Schroeder Bank and Trust, 0.5%. Manufacturer Hanover is at 7%. And Morgan Guaranty Trust is 9%. And National Bank of North America is 2%. Now, these numbers you don't really understand probably. It blows you away because a lot of these banks are no longer in business. They've been bought out or either merged with other banks. In fact, they haven't gone out of business. They've usually been merged with others. And so what I'm trying to explain to you, when they say that they're trying to stop inflation, that's not really what they're doing. What they're doing is preventing other companies that are trying to compete with each other or to make money, and they can no longer borrow money at high rate. And so you have had two major deals happen here in the last probably week or so, maybe 10 days. One is just recently a Dodge factory in Illinois, I think it is Belvidere, Illinois, has closed. It's a Dodge Chrysler, which is actually owned by another company also, Fiat, which is not an American company. And so what they've done is simply this. They've closed shop. And I think 1,300 to 1,400 people lost their jobs. And they claim that basically is to do with having to make conversions over to electric cars. It might be the excuse, but they also are going to make those cars now in Mexico. So those jobs are gone. So those people who worked in those facilities are what I call union workers are going not to make what they were making. And they really are going to have some type of help, yes, but eventually that will be only for a short while, maybe a year or two, and then it will be all gone. So my thoughts of this is that another company in North Carolina, Mississippi, and I think one other place, I think in Arkansas, was making what we call wholesale furniture, and they laid off right before Thanksgiving, right around 2,500 workers. There was no unemployment. That is when I say unemployment. Nothing from they were told before the holiday that they were closing the plant, and they didn't even tell them in person. They actually emailed them and told them that way. So this is just to share with you what is going on. So some of the things that Mr. Ulysses Mullins is involved in, he talks about some key individuals here. So I'm going to share a little thing also here, because I just want to explain to you that there were people who were actually trying to stop this, but they were in the small minority. In fact, they're very small minority, but they had guts, and they stood for what is right. I doubt we even have one congressman or senator in our country that actually would do what these guys do. And if they did, they would do it only for showmanship. It wouldn't be for reality. So I'm going to tell you a little story about someone. And that particular person is a guy named Charles Augustus Lindbergh Sr. Now, this is the father of Lindbergh, who flew to Britain by himself. He was a congressman from Minnesota from 1907 to 1917, who led the fight against enactment of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. He served until 1917, when he resigned to run for governor of Minnesota. He ran a good campaign despite adverse newspapers attacks led by the New York Times. His campaign was already adversely affected when federal agents burned his books. You heard that right. Federal agents burned his books. They came to his place where he was hometown. He had an office, and they came there and they burned his books. And one of the books was, "Why is Your Country at War?" In other words, it was to do with the First World War. And the papers and contents of his home office in Little Falls, Minnesota. You mean that government agents do this? Yes, they do. They sure do. They get paid to do that. They do harm to other people. They get paid money. Paper money. Not even real money, folks. So, most are not aware he passed away in 1924. So, it was his son who was what I would call a leader. And naturally, he flew, again, like I said, by himself, solo, to England in the 1930s, and maybe the 1920s. A hero. He came up and he ran for office and became a congressman also. And he spoke out against this, and his child was kidnapped. I don't know if it's a boy or girl, but they took his child, and someone murdered that child. There are those that say basically it was a plot or thing by Lindbergh to get attention. Sorry, folks, it doesn't work that way. Because he spoke out. He was the tiny minority trying to warn Americans about what was going on. It was the organization he was involved with was called America First. In other words, let's deal with our own country and put our country first in all categories, and let's look out for Americans. This is in the late 30s, during the days of Roosevelt. So he basically was threatened with his life also. So it's not only the father, but it's the son also. You'll find that all the books are glorification of what Charles Lindbergh Jr. did, but never really refer to any of this stuff at all. They don't talk about this. They cover it up. They cover up all this glorious stuff, such and such. Now imagine yourself, a congressman speaking out, going back to his dad about this whole thing, and your books are all burned. Not by some hooligan or something of that nature, but by federal officials. By federal officials. This is in the early 1900s, folks. So I wanted to share with you some key persons or key people that you need to look into and do some digging, because this might help you figure out a lot more. Some of these men are Colonel Edward Mandell House, the confidant for President Woodrow Wilson, a very, very, very important man who had the attention of Woodrow Wilson when he was president. And Woodrow Wilson, it seems as though, believed just about every word that he said to him and adopted the policies that he wanted to be done. There was another particular congressman that stood out, was Robert Marion LaFollette, who was a senator from Wisconsin. You can look into that. You can look into Louis McFadden, a brave congressman who spoke against Roosevelt, who eventually was poisoned to death. John Pierre Morgan, you can look him up, banker. David Mullins, who's involved with the Federal Reserve Board. Another congressman named Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, Patman, P-A-T-M-A-N, a House member guy, till 1976, and spoke out against it, and actually he retired. So there's others here. Let me show you a few more. Jacob Schiff, S-C-H-I-F-F, a very key individual. Very key individual from Germany, a banker. Sir Gordon Richardson. This is a guy who was the head of the Bank of England in the 1970s. Look at his name up, Sir Gordon Richardson. Baron Kurt von Schroeder, that's spelled S-C-H-R-O-D-E-R. He was Adolf Hitler's personal banker. Anthony Morgan Solomon. You would need to look into him also. He speaks about what I would call, he was part of the Ways and Means Committee, House of Representatives from 72 to 73. Another key individual was Samuel Untermyer, that's spelled U-N-T-E-R-M-Y-E-R, a partner in the law firm of Guggenheimer and Untermyer of New York, who conducted the particular hearings of the House Bank and Currency Committee in 1912. Very key to looking at him. Very key individual. Frank Vanderlip. This is the guy who is the president at one time of the National City Bank in New York City from 1909 to 1918. Again, very key individuals here, folks. These are power brokers, very important people. We have later on, in recent times, Paul Volcker, who was the Federal Reserve Bank chairman of the Carter administration. It's Volcker. A couple other guys here is Paul Warburg. Paul Warburg is probably the major guy here, all these guys. And he was a snake in the grass, as I would call it. He's the one who met with all those at the Jekyll Island situation, met in the early 1911 or 12, ironing out all this. Paul Warburg put all this together. He is from Germany, and he's eventually came here to America in the early 1900s and became a U.S. citizen. And what transpires simply is that what he does is that he puts it all together there in Jekyll Island. There are two plans. There's the Republican plan that's involved with Taft, and then there's the Democrat plan of what we call Woodrow Wilson, which is the Aldrich plan, which is named after the former senator of New Jersey, who was there at Jekyll Island. Okay. In fact, when they went to Jekyll Island, they never gave their total names. They used nicknames in the coach that they went. They went on a private coach, a private train, private car on the back of the engine locomotive, that is, the cars, and it was the back one. That's still done today. You pay a fee, certain things of that nature, and you can do that. In the past, it was more common to do, but now it's not that much. Paul Warburg is also when both House and Senate approved of this particular bill, but it was actually 30 or 40 differences between the two bills. Okay, so what happened was some of the congressmen and senators left for the Christmas holidays, and they assumed that basically when they came back they were going to deal with that. No, they didn't work that way. This was done in secret, done in the dark. And so what transpired simply was that Paul Warburg and all these group of people worked together to eventually bring both of those bills and made them work into one. And then what they did was simply they voted on them and approved them, again at middle of the night. And the next day, Woodrow Wilson signs it. Didn't waste any time. Less than 24 hours after it had been passed. During the night, the president signed it the next day. In other words, to guarantee, not if something that Wilson passed away or had an accident or whatever, it was going to make sure this was going to be approved. So I know this particular book is actually on eBay. I've seen it, the last few days. I've looked at it, or certain books, and I look at it and I see that this book is still on sale. Do you know what Eustace Mullins did for people here? I may not agree with some of his things. His background is Christian. And I don't always agree with certain things, but he was a brilliant man. And the key thing is simply Ezra Pound had an enormous impact upon this man at a very young age. And so he was able, which we are most of the time not able to, he was able to go to the Library of Congress and get books that basically me and you would never even heard of. Where you would probably say simply is a little crank occurring in a certain area was where such and such. And there would be a librarian, he would ask for certain assistance from the librarian there at the Library of Congress library. Ask for those books, that person would bring those books to him, and he would sit there and write notes on whatever he had to do in this. Okay, much easier today. You can make copies of these things or something like that if you can find them. So the materials he had simply were probably far more, because this is used for the Congress to actually to do their research on particular things in the past or whatever, and when they speak such and such. Okay, so it's a way of them having a library on their own for them, but it's also open to the citizens. You see, now I don't know if it's open now to that point, but he was able to do that. Eventually, when he began to do all this stuff, put it together. In a short while, then they barred him from going there. Now, if that's not a red flag, what is it? So, Mr. Eustace Mullins, he has graphs in this book also. There are graphs here telling what such and such has happened. He talks about all these things of what they took place, how much stock they bought in the Federal Reserve, who bought it, all that kind of stuff. I don't know of anybody else that did all this kind of work and got paid. He did it to warn Americans. He didn't get paid for it, folks. Come on, let's get real. You know that Mr. Eustace Mullins never got married. Are you well aware that the reason why he didn't get married? The reason why he was not married was simply because he couldn't make enough money to take care of a family or his wife. That's sacrifice, folks. His parents were also treated badly by federal officials, too. In fact, his dad was beat up by a federal official, threatened. Eventually, his dad passed away a short period afterwards because of all the fear and panic. Because they would go to his father's house and would just continue to barrage these people, putting pressure on them, trying to make them break. Eventually, he passed with a heart attack. His mother, the next one they picked on, and did the same thing. In fact, even his sister was done that way. Trying to break the family, trying to get to their son to destroy him. If that's not important in what he shared, what is, folks? So he lost his family, he lost his father, his mom, and his sister. Do you know anybody that does that? Do you? Do you know anyone who would do anything of that nature? That loved his country and loved trying to help people? Do you? Do you know of anybody that does that, folks? I don't know of anybody. He was mocked. Even a lady who came to interview him back, I guess in the 80s or 90s, came to his house, which actually at that time all his family was gone, so he was still living at the house there. So he didn't have a lot of money, but he had a lot of guts. Far more guts than probably 1,000 men out here. And he wasn't a very big man either. He's probably written 15 to 20 books. Most of these are probably what I call self-published. Meaning simply is he couldn't go to someone that actually publishes books. He had to have them published by somebody or himself. He wrote other books. He wrote a book here, The World Order. It talks about the difficult individual named Ezra Pound. It's not in a condemnation way, but actually in a positive way. A Writ for Martyrs. Murder by Injection. Yeah, we're still dealing with that right now, folks, aren't we? The Rape of Justice and The Curse of Canaan. The last book gives you an idea of who's behind this and why we are at a desperate situation here. Not only here in America, but here all over the world. You must become aware of who and what is out to destroy mankind. because this is what this is about, folks. It's a very serious subject. So I hope that you glean something from this. I hope that you have a desire to know the truth, because if you don't have a desire for truth, you're not going to find it. You're not. I'm 62 years old. My path and what I've done in life has been simply is that I somehow has brought me to this. I studied political science in college, had an interest in international affairs. Actually was involved with the Republican Party in the late 70s and early 80s. I was duped, just like everybody else. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I was duped by political parties. Then I went to seminary and discovered other things that I was duped into also, with religion. And I also worked for my dad, who had a small business here, and learned how hard it is to run a small business in some ways, and how taxes are affecting you. Those who always say that these people have small business, they really have it easy, that's bullshit. It has rewards, but it's also you're the conductor. You're the one that runs the train in this business, such and such. And reality simply is, it teaches you about a lot of things about life, who you can trust and whose word is true about a lot of things. It also teaches you that basically, if you want the business, you engage with people and you do what you say you're going to do. Because that's your word is true. Because that's how it works. It used to. It's not anymore. It's a different ball. It's all changed in the last 20 years. Radically changed. And it's still changing. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you. If you have questions, I'll be glad to share these with you. So thank you for listening again. And you have a great day. And thank you.